Today I'm going to talk about how my wife and I almost divorced, what helped us save our marriage, and how those lessons could save yours also. So let's start from the beginning. My wife and I started dating in 1999. We were college sweethearts. I was a sophomore, she was a freshman, and we fell madly in love. It was love at first sight. She was the girl in the dorms that I was most attracted to. She was most attracted to me. The problem is I was already dating someone, and so was she, but in different states. So in the beginning, I had a crush on her and she had a crush on me, but we were tied up with these other relationships. So our first step is we had to end those relationships. And then a couple weeks into school, we started hanging out, we started spending more time together. And before we knew it, we were just hitting things off and fell madly in love. And like a lot of couples, we thought things were going to be easy. Things were going to be simple. We weren't going to have any problems. We were going to ride off into the sunset and just have this easy, amazing relationship. Well, shortly after we started dating and things got serious, she got depressed. She fell into a major depression about a year after dating, and that became really hard because those were our college years. Those were supposed to be the time in our lives where everything was going to be great, but she was not great, and we were so connected, it was really hard to break things up, even though she was depressed, and it really changed my college experience and her college experience. But thankfully, she worked through that and we worked through it together. And then we kept dating through the rest of college. So we dated about 3.5 years and then we got married. And what we didn't know was my wife had a lot of sexual trauma from her upbringing. By the way, she allows me to share this story and I've shared it in other places. She had a lot of sexual trauma. And like most trauma, her trauma did not surface until she felt really secure. And she didn't feel really secure in our relationship until we got married. So we dated through college. And then after we both graduated, we got married. So I was almost 24, she was almost 22. We got married. And the way her trauma surfaced was that she wanted nothing to do with physical intimacy. The bedroom was off limits. And I, as the high libido partner, would pursue her and she would get hostile toward my advances because on a subconscious level, I reminded her of her trauma growing up, her unwanted sexual experiences growing up. I reminded her of that. And so we developed this really toxic, vicious cycle where when I would pursue, she would become hostile. And then instead of me being compassionate in response, her anger and her rejection was so strong, I would respond with anger. And the more I would respond with anger, the more unsafe I seemed. So she would pull away physically even more. The more she would pull away physically, the more angry I would become. And so we both developed this vicious cycle where both of us started feeling unsafe in the relationship. And we had always been really close emotionally. We always had this great friendship, but because the physical was breaking down, it slowly started breaking down the emotional as well. Now, to make it worse, I was going through school to become a therapist at the time. And so I thought that I could fix us. We didn't need to see somebody. We didn't need to go to a counselor. I was becoming a counselor. And so I thought I could do this. I can heal us. And I was so wrong because I was not objective. My needs were at stake. My wife was not seeing me as a therapist, understandably, because I was her partner, not her therapist. But that prolonged our vicious cycles because I refused any professional help. And because of that, our vicious cycles got worse and worse and worse. If I approached her for physical intimacy, she would get hostile. And then in response to her hostility, I would get hostile. And again, just this vicious cycle where neither of us felt safe and both of us started walling off more and more and more until finally we had so many walls, so many resentments where I thought we were going to get a divorce. I didn't know how to save our marriage. I didn't know what to do. And I was starting to feel really lost. And when we were on the brink of divorce, I finally relented and said, fine, I'm open to seeing a counselor or a therapist. And that started a 5-year journey for us for healing to save our marriage. We went from therapist to therapist, trauma therapist, sex therapist, you name it. We went to all kinds of counselors for 5 years to try to heal this toxic pattern. Because even though she had trauma from her upbringing that she brought into the relationship, our vicious cycles compounded the trauma. And I was traumatized also. It wasn't just her, it was also me. We both felt traumatized from our relationship. But thankfully, through those 5 years of therapy, counseling, all of the treatment we went through, that slowly started to heal us. We slowly started to mend our relationship. We slowly started to heal the resentments, and the walls slowly started coming down. We were able to start tending to each other's needs again. Our emotional intimacy slowly started coming back, and our physical intimacy slowly started getting restored. And now we are more happily married than we ever have been. Our emotional and physical intimacy is better than it ever has been. And so I'm walking proof that if you're feeling hopeless in your marriage, you're not sure how to save your marriage, that it is possible. So there's several lessons I'm going to go through now that hopefully will encourage you with where you're at in your relationship. Number one is don't give up. As long as you and your partner are both willing to keep working on your relationship, don't give up on your relationship. Don't give up on your marriage. There were so many times where I wanted to give up on my marriage. I wanted a divorce. Everything in me wanted out. I was so unhappy. My needs weren't being met. I was so out of love. But I knew as long as she was willing to keep working at it, then I was willing to keep working at it as well. So that's one thing I would encourage you with. Think about, is your partner willing to keep working on the marriage? If they are, don't give up. That means there's still hope. People often ask me, when do I know there's no more hope in our marriage? You know there's no more hope when you and your partner decide to stop working on your relationship. That's when there's no more hope. But as long as you and your spouse are both willing, don't give up. Keep working at it. And by the way, if you want my guide on how to rebuild your marriage in 90 days, just comment the word guide below and I'll send it to you. A second lesson that I learned, which may be obvious, is reach out for support. Don't be like me. Don't be stubborn. Don't be prideful and think that you can figure it out on your own. You know, we go to all these other experts for services in our life, the dentist, the plumber, the mechanic. But when it comes to our marriage, for some reason, we think we should be able to figure this out on our own. And it's just unrealistic. We're not trained on how to have good marriages. And so don't feel ashamed. Don't feel embarrassed that you may need a marriage counselor or a marriage coach. Reach out for help, because the longer you wait, the worse things are going to get. Research shows that most couples wait 4 to 7 years after problems begin before reaching out for help. And that's what we did. That's how long we waited. And when you wait that long, at least one partner is hanging on by a thread. And you have so many walls, and there's so much resentment and bitterness that it makes it hard to rebound, makes it hard to heal. There's so much scar tissue. So if that's you, don't wait. Stop waiting. If you and your partner are both open to healing, get it now. A third lesson I learned is owning your part. Because my wife was the one who brought in all the sexual trauma, I blamed her for everything. I thought it was all her fault. I thought if she wouldn't have brought in all that trauma, we would have had no problems in our marriage. What I wasn't recognizing was my reaction to her trauma, my anger in response to her rejection, was making everything worse. I wasn't responding with compassion. I wasn't being understanding. Because of all the rejection and her hostility, I responded with hostility. And I justified my hostility because of her rejection. But that was me not owning my part. That's one thing I had to learn, was that my reactions to her were making everything worse. And that was the part I had to learn to own. Because you're not going to get anywhere when you're just blaming each other for who's at fault. Because most of the time, you're both at fault. Granted, maybe one partner is more at fault than the other one. But in my situation, I had to stop blaming her for all of our problems. Because when you blame someone, they just get defensive. It doesn't go anywhere. So instead, I had to work on me. I had to figure out, how can I be more compassionate? How can I be more understanding despite her constant rejection? Despite her constant anger at my desire for intimacy, how can I work on my reaction to that so that she's not pointing the finger at me? And once I started working on me, things started to shift, because then I wasn't blaming her. Then I was just working on how I can provide unconditional love with or without intimacy. And that was important for her because she had a script that she's only loved if she provides intimacy. So my growth area was to become more patient and unconditionally loving with or without intimacy. And then that started conveying the message that she's loved no matter what, which slowly healed her so that then she could become more open to intimacy. So I just encourage you to think about, what is your piece? What is your part? How are you making things worse in your marriage? Maybe it's 10%, maybe it's 5%, maybe it's 15% that you're contributing. But you can almost guarantee you are doing something that's making things worse. And that's all you can own. So try to locate, what is it that you're doing that's contributing to the problems in your marriage, that's what you can really work on. That's what you can really change. And by doing that, you're doing all that you can, and hopefully that will inspire your partner to do the same. And by the way, if you want my guide on how to rebuild your marriage in 90 days, just comment the word guide below and I'll send it to you. Hope you enjoyed this walk and talk video. It's the first time I've done this. If you enjoyed this style, let me know that in the comments as well. Just comment below more. Just let me know if you like this kind of style, and I'll do more of these types of videos. And if you found this video helpful, be sure to watch this one next.